Chosen one, pause for just a second. Don't swipe, don't scroll, don't brush this off like another passing voice in a noisy world. This isn't entertainment, this isn't hype. This is a divine alert, a sacred interruption sent from the throne of heaven, a spiritual summons sent to wake up what's been sleeping inside you. You can feel it, can't you? Something in your spirit just stood up. Why is your heart beating faster right now? Why does this feel different? Because the strikes are coming, not just in the physical. Oh no, this is much deeper. These are the spiritual strikes that shift nations, rewrite bloodlines, and silence enemies without a word. And before they hit, heaven is doing something rare, something holy, something that hasn't been allowed until now. The tool that was once hidden, forbidden, wrapped in mystery, is now being placed in your hands. Do you even realize what that means? Do you truly understand what it costs heaven to say, now it's allowed? Chosen one, you've walked through years of silence, of being misunderstood, overlooked, even rejected, while carrying the very frequency that threatens hell itself. You've obeyed in secret. You've waited when others ran ahead. You've silenced your voice while fire burned in your bones. And now, God says, use it, speak it, move. What once felt off limits is now required. This is not just permission, it's a command. And if you're still here, it's because you were meant to hear this. You didn't stumble here, you were summoned here. There are no coincidences in the kingdom. The question is, will you respond before the window closes? You may have thought you were being punished, but what if the silence was really preservation? What if what you thought was delay was actually divine incubation, a holy holding pattern while heaven positioned your enemies, your allies, your timing? Can you look back now and see the mercy in the waiting? And now a choice stands in front of you. Will you shrink or will you strike? This is spiritual warfare at the highest level, and God is no longer asking you to whisper. He's asking you to command. You were never called to survive the storm. You were born to speak to it, stand through it, and shift the atmosphere with your very presence. Are you ready to release what's been dormant? Before we unlock the next layer, I'm asking you to do 3 prophetic things. Not for me, not for the algorithm, but as a spiritual act of alignment. Hit that like button. This is your yes in motion, your amen in the digital realm. Subscribe, not just to follow, but to receive what's coming next. These words are portals. Comment 777 below, because that number is no accident. It means completion, covenant, confirmation. If this word is speaking directly into your soul, write 777 like a spiritual stamp that says, I receive, I agree, I'm aligned. And to every soul who's ever given through a super thanks, whether you sowed financially or simply with your love and presence, thank you. I don't take it lightly. Your support isn't just helping this message go out. It's helping destinies awaken. You are part of this divine assignment. So let me ask you one more thing. What if what you've been waiting to receive, heaven has been waiting for you to activate? Because what's next, what's coming in the next few minutes, is not just revelation, it's the release. And when it hits you, when it lands in your spirit, nothing in your life will stay the same. Now, let's go deeper. God's chosen ones, before the strikes happen. Use this. Now it's allowed. For generations there existed a sacred chamber of divine access, sealed, guarded not by angels with flaming swords, but by heaven's own timing. This wasn't because God wished to punish or withhold, but because the atmosphere of earth was too unstable to carry such glory. Human hearts pulsed with ambition more than humility, minds scattered in search of quick fixes rather than alignment. The divine method, potent beyond measure, had to remain concealed. Why release a weapon of pure light into hands still addicted to shadow? But something has changed. The realm between the natural and supernatural has thinned. Heaven is whispering to a remnant. Only the spiritually attuned can sense it. Those who have endured seasons of silence without bitterness, who obeyed when no applause followed. Could it be that you are one of them? Could it be that the chills you feel when truth is spoken are not emotion, but confirmation? This is no religious theater, no myth to comfort the desperate. This is a real system, ancient in origin, divine in nature, and active now. The world burns with headlines, wars breaking out, anxiety gripping generations, identity unraveling like old thread. But beneath the noise, beneath the shaking, lies a scroll of strategy etched by the hand of God Himself. You've been feeling that holy pull, haven't you? A knowing that something more is expected of you, even if you can't yet explain it. King David once received divine instructions for battle, not written in any Torah or scroll, but spoken through the rustling of mulberry trees. 2 Samuel 5:24. God said, "When you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, move quickly." What if you've been standing near your own sacred trees and didn't recognize the sound? What if God's signal has been surrounding you in disguised form? The access point is now revealed, not to make you escape the chaos, but to make you immune to its poison. It's not a back door out of responsibility. It's a front line into alignment. You've been entrusted with something no denomination, no leader, no philosophy could have prepared you for. What you are being asked to carry is frequency, not just faith, vibration, not just vocabulary, obedience, not just opinion. Are you ready to hold what most still fear to touch? Consider the story of Esther, chosen not because of her beauty, but because of her hidden strength. When her people were on the verge of destruction, her uncle Mordecai didn't ask her to pray harder. He said, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther 4:14. Has it occurred to you that your positioning, the rejections, the delays, the wilderness, was part of heaven's choreography? You are not random. You are not replaceable. Like Joseph in prison, interpreting dreams that would shape empires. Like Elijah hearing God's voice, not in the earthquake, but in the whisper. Like Mary Magdalene, first to see the resurrected Christ because she stayed when others left. Each one activated their moment by responding to a divine permission. Could this be your moment to respond? The late Cardinal Carlo Maria Martini, a Jesuit scholar and archbishop, once said, "The Church is 200 years behind the times." But prophetic time isn't measured by trends, it's measured by obedience. You are not late, you are not early, you are right on time for this release. Mira, a young trauma nurse in her 30s, had recurring dreams of disaster, tsunamis, fires, floods. For months, she brushed them off. But one night, the dream ended differently. She saw herself lifting people out of the waves, not drowning with them. She began praying differently, showing up differently. The very next week, she saved a boy from suicide simply by listening when no one else did. Her dream wasn't fear, it was her activation. Darius, a 17-year-old who never spoke in public, felt compelled to sing at his father's funeral. No one had ever heard his voice. But when he opened his mouth, something heavenly came through. Not just sound, but healing. Entire relatives reconciled. Years of silence ended. That wasn't talent, that was timing. What are you hiding in fear that heaven is waiting to unleash? Artist and activist Ai Weiwei once said, "Your own acts tell the world who you are and what kind of society you think it should be." He faced imprisonment, censorship, and surveillance, but he created anyway. What if your resistance to use your gift isn't humility, but fear disguised as wisdom. You are not being called to join something new. You are being called to become something ancient. This is not a trend. This is soul survival. This is energetic recalibration. This is spiritual re-entry into an atmosphere that once seemed too high for you, but now resonates with your name. Why now? Because the strikes are no longer coming. They've begun, and God wouldn't have awakened you if you weren't meant to respond. Like the eagle that senses a shift in wind pressure long before the storm hits, your spirit has been sensing something deeper. While others remain grounded, you were born to rise, not in noise, but in clarity, not in panic, but in purpose. The door has opened, the restriction is lifted, now it's allowed. If these words are reaching you, it's not coincidence or clever timing. Something ancient within you is already responding. Your inner compass has tilted, your spirit has stood at attention. You feel it, don't you? That stirring in your chest, the one logic can't explain. Why is your heart racing when your mind says, it's just another message? Why does this feel familiar, as if you've heard it before in a dream you forgot? That's because you're not just anyone. You are not another face in the crowd. You are one of the few, one of the 1% God has marked to be awake when others are asleep. And now you're being summoned into what can't be seen with natural eyes. This isn't superstition. This is spiritual strategy. You are not being invited to watch history unfold. You are being positioned to shift it. We've entered an age of overlapping wars, missiles on one hand, mental warfare on the other, but only one of them trends. What happens in hospitals, in courtrooms, in nations is only the surface. The deeper battlefield? It's happening in homes, in bedrooms, in minds. Spiritual bleeding has begun, but most are too numb to notice. How many times have you been overwhelmed by exhaustion, not knowing it was actually spiritual warfare wearing a disguise? Fatigue, confusion, rage, depression, they no longer whisper. They strike like arrows. They latch onto frequency, not just feelings. Why do so many break under pressure without visible cause? Because they've been unarmed in a spiritual strike they were never trained to recognize. The next wave will not come with warning sirens. It will target your thoughts, your clarity, your discernment. Are you ready? In the book of Daniel, the prophet fasted and prayed for 21 days without an answer. Yet when the angel finally arrived, he said, "From the first day that you set your heart to understand, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days." Daniel 10:12-13. What if your prayers were never ignored, but intercepted in unseen warfare? Could your delay be evidence not of God's absence, but of angelic battle? The physical wars on your screen reflect the invisible war in the heavens. The Apostle Paul reminded us, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Ephesians 6:12. But most live as if the only battlefield is the news cycle. What if you knew the true war was over vibration, over frequency, over spiritual bandwidth? Just last year, Alessia, a quiet baker from Madrid, began experiencing violent nightmares and daily panic attacks. No diagnosis helped. Meds numbed her. But one night she decided to recite Psalm 91 out loud in her kitchen while baking. Everything changed. The nightmares ceased. Her anxiety lifted like fog at sunrise. Her healing didn't come from therapy or theology. It came from spiritual alignment. Chosen one, you're not here to be a spectator to collapse. You were born into this hour of shaking on purpose. Your generation will not survive on information alone. It must awaken in frequency. This forbidden trick, once hidden, once sealed, is not superstition. It's your armor, your access point, the alignment mechanism that recalibrates you to the divine rhythm, not the chaos of the world. Michelangelo, the Renaissance sculptor and painter, once said, "I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free." That's what God sees in you. Not chaos, not trauma, but divine architecture buried under pressure. Are you willing to carve away what the world built to uncover what heaven already placed inside? There was a boy named Evan from Colorado. At age 14, he began hearing strange ringing in his ears whenever he entered certain rooms. Doctors called it tinnitus, but his grandmother, a quiet prayer warrior, taught him to listen, not silence it. Over time, he noticed the ringing intensified during spiritual activity. At church, it would swell during certain prayers. At school, it blared in the presence of specific classmates. He wasn't cursed, he was spiritually tuned. What if your sensitivities aren't weaknesses but alarms? Pope Benedict XVI once said, "The world offers you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness." Comfort zones are the first places to collapse when spiritual earthquakes begin. And you're not being prepared to hide. You're being prepared to stand. Many try to armor themselves with noise, more data, more distraction, more denial. But chosen ones like you are invited into stillness, into clarity, into supernatural preparedness. Why do you think your rest has been under attack? Your joy, your identity? Because what you carry is dangerous to darkness. Picture the mountain lion, silent, precise, patient. It does not panic. It waits, knowing its senses are sharper than its environment. That is your calling now. Not to be loud, but lethal in the spirit. Not reactionary, but radiant. The urgency you feel in your gut is not fear. It's heaven's countdown. Every delay you've faced, every tear you've cried, every moment you've questioned your own mind. It's all been preparation. You weren't placed in this generation by accident. You were born to witness the unraveling and withstand it. Don't wait for collapse to activate your calling. Don't wait for headlines to prove your discernment was right. Don't wait until you're breaking to realize you were in battle all along. The time to move is now. The permission has already been given. God is not speaking through chaos or noise right now, not through fire or flood, not through thunderclaps or visible miracles. His voice in this hour is cloaked in silence, and only those who have trained their spirit to listen in stillness will catch it. Can you hear it yet? That barely there whisper moving through the static of your mind. What if the silence you've been afraid of is actually where your next command is hidden? This isn't superstition. This isn't mystical fluff or religious extremism. What is being revealed to you now is spiritual technology, a divine instrument once too powerful for unprepared hands. It was not given as a backup plan or a ritual for the desperate. It is your first defense, your first strike in a war most people don't even know they're in. The ancients understood its weight. Prophets hinted at it, but were told to seal the scrolls. Because the wrong hands, ego-driven, fame-hungry, manipulative, would have twisted it into a weapon of spiritual ruin. But today is different. Today, heaven is tearing the seal open, not for everyone, but for the ones heaven trusts to carry it. Could that be you? Are you truly ready to hold what others only dreamed about touching? Daniel was once told to shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Daniel 12:4. That time is no longer the future, it's now. The book is opening, the code is transmitting. The divine signal is searching for the ones who are not just curious, but calibrated. You aren't stumbling into this message, you're syncing with it. Why does your spirit feel like it's remembering something ancient, something buried deep? This connection isn't mediated by tradition or trends. It's not dependent on incense, moon cycles, or meditative chants. It doesn't require a title, a building, or a pulpit. It requires something harder: stillness, obedience, and alignment. The divine frequency you're tuning into predates religion and will outlast every collapsing empire. You are not meant to sit on the sidelines of this spiritual shift. You are meant to alter its direction. During the crucifixion, the veil in the temple tore from top to bottom, not from man to God, but from God to man, access was granted. That's what's happening again. This isn't a revival of old ways. It's the resurrection of forgotten power. What was once too strong for the collective soul of humanity is now the only strength capable of saving it. Are you willing to carry something that heavy and still remain hidden? Remember Elijah? He ran from Jezebel in fear and collapsed under a tree asking to die. But God didn't rebuke him. He sent an angel with food, twice. And then, when Elijah hid in a cave, the wind came, then the earthquake, then the fire. But God was not in them. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. That whisper was his next assignment. What if your assignment isn't coming in a storm, but in a silence you've been avoiding? Eva, a deaf woman in Argentina, learned to sense divine promptings through pressure in her chest. During a massive blackout, she felt that pressure and evacuated her elderly neighbor's building moments before a generator exploded. No one had taught her theology. She had only ever asked God, "Teach me how to feel you." And he did. Her silence was her sonar. Leon, a former boxer turned youth mentor in South Africa, says he only hears God in water, showers, rain, rivers. One night, waist deep in the Limpopo, he heard in his spirit, "Step out and speak." He went straight to a shelter and shared his testimony. 2 teens decided not to end their lives that night. He didn't plan a sermon, he obeyed a whisper. Spiritual pioneers have always been misunderstood. The mystics, the prophets, the ones who stepped away from crowds to listen to what couldn't be heard. Simone Weil, the French philosopher and Christian mystic, once said, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." That's what this technique requires. Not performance, but presence. Not volume, but vibration. You're not here to impress heaven. You're here to receive from it. This access point is not about proving your power. It's about trusting God's. The trick is not flashy. It will never go viral. It won't fit into reels or highlight clips. But it will rewire your entire soul structure. It will burn what needs burning. It will restore what's been dead. It will protect what's been targeted. Are you brave enough to carry something that asks for your silence instead of your status? Like the roots of a tree that dig downward while storms rage above, this spiritual code is stabilizing you in unseen realms. While others look up waiting for signs, you're being called to go inward, where the signal is strongest. While they build towers, you build altars. While they panic, you prepare. God is not giving this to the loudest. He's giving it to the most tuned in. And once you receive it, you can't use it casually. You must carry it like fire on your tongue. It will cost you your comfort, but it will return to you your clarity. What heaven has unsealed was once forbidden for a reason. But now God is saying, "I've trusted you with this key. Now prove that you were worthy of the unlock." Heaven doesn't move like earth. It doesn't respond to urgency in the way humans do. While people beg for thunder, fire, and visible signs, God often answers through a gentle unease, a divine discomfort that interrupts your schedule, your plans, and your certainty. What if that tension in your chest isn't anxiety, but invitation? What if your restlessness is not a flaw, but a frequency? The systems of God exist outside the realm of deadlines, clocks, and human logic. The divine pathway, the real one, the narrow one, is open now, but it is not wide. It has never been wide. And now, as this world barrels toward collapse, culturally, economically, spiritually, that gate is beginning to narrow even more. Not out of cruelty, but out of urgency. Can you feel it? Jesus once said, "Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it." Matthew 7:13. But how many today are choosing convenience over consecration? Volume over virtue. Who's really watching the signs? Not in the sky, but in the soul. This trick, this divine technology, isn't a novelty. It's a lifeline. It's not a luxury for the spiritually curious. It's a necessity for the spiritually awake. You don't have the luxury of years, not even months. You have moments, holy windows, in which obedience is the only safe path. Have you been brushing off heaven's whisper for something louder, more obvious? Amid wars and rumors of wars, financial chaos and collective despair, the world grows louder. But the Spirit is whispering, always softer, always clearer, that impression you've been ignoring. That ache you can't name, that unshakable sense that something deeper is calling you, that is the gate, and it is nudging you in. Will you answer before it closes? Jeremiah, known as the weeping prophet, once declared, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." Jeremiah 29:13. Not when you seek casually, not when it's convenient, but when the noise of this world finally collapses under its own weight, and all you have left is desperation and divine hunger. Andre, a Haitian-American sculptor who lost both parents in a flood, began carving wooden angels in silence for 3 hours every morning. Not for profit, not for prayer, but because he said it was the only way he could hear God again. His silence became a sanctuary. Within a year, one of his sculptures was purchased by the Vatican and placed in a chapel in Rome. He hadn't sought exposure. He sought alignment. Clara, a tech consultant in Toronto, was diagnosed with a neurological condition that dulled her senses. But instead of spiraling, she began whispering to herself daily, "I am one with God." She did this with her hands covering her eyes, her soul tuned in, and something began to shift. She started dreaming again, dreams filled with colors she could no longer physically see. In one of those dreams, she saw a door of light that pulsed with her heartbeat. When she spoke the phrase again, "I am one with God," it opened. This isn't about religion. This is about restoration. You're not empty. You were never broken in the way the world told you. The world's systems have clouded your sight, numbed your hearing, distorted your divine signal. But your design is still intact. You were built to receive downloads from heaven. You were formed to interpret eternal wisdom. Saint Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century Benedictine abbess and mystic, once described divine insight as the living light. She said, "The soul is kissed by God in its innermost regions." What if the ache you carry isn't pain? It's the imprint of that kiss. There's a reason the veil between heaven and earth is thin to some and thick to others. Purity isn't perfection, it's alignment. Preparedness isn't busyness, it's stillness. Awakening doesn't begin with performance, it begins with surrender. Are you willing to strip away the noise long enough to truly see? Picture the snow owl gliding through a moonlit forest, silent, swift, guided only by instinct. It doesn't announce its presence. It doesn't chase its prey with fury. It listens, it waits, and then, in stillness, it strikes with precision. That is the posture of the awakened soul, not frantic, but fierce in stillness. You are standing at the edge of your own gate. This isn't poetic metaphor. This is spiritual reality. The famine is coming, not one of food, but of clarity, of discernment, of unclouded access. You don't have time to wait for confirmation from voices who aren't even listening. The activation is yours to initiate. Place your hands over your eyes, not to blind yourself, but to focus. Say it now, not just with your mouth, but with your frequency. I am one with God. Let those words become your password to heaven. Let that phrase become the frequency that tears through the veil. It's not a spell, it's a signal. Before the strike lands, before the gate locks, before the last distraction numbs your soul, You still have access. Use it. There are vaults in heaven, not metaphorical ones, but spiritual reserves, overflowing with insight, healing, strategies, and strength for those aligned to receive. These aren't earned through striving or unlocked by ritual. They open through alignment. You don't need to beg for what's already yours, but you must be positioned to receive it. Are you finally ready to stop chasing and start sinking? The technique may appear simple: both hands over your eyes, darkness within, silence without. But in the spirit, this is no mere posture. It's a re-entry point, a recalibration into heaven's command center, where your soul reports directly to the divine. You're not running from reality. You're tuning into a higher one. You are not checking out. You're checking in with the highest frequency a human soul can carry. What if your next breakthrough is not waiting on a louder sermon, but on deeper silence? In Psalm 46:10, God says, "Be still and know that I am God." But that stillness isn't passive. It's an activation. It's a spiritual password that lets you in while the rest of the world scrolls past. Have you mistaken stillness for stagnation? How many miracles have you delayed waiting for signs, while heaven waited for stillness? If you could see, truly see, what exists behind the veil of your distractions, your fears, your fatigue, you would never waste another minute. Waiting for you in stillness is divine clarity, unshakable peace, and inner invincibility. But here's the truth. Only those brave enough to shut their outer eyes will unlock the vision of their inner world. Are you bold enough to look within? When Saul was blinded on the road to Damascus, his physical vision shut down so that his divine assignment could activate. In that moment of darkness, his identity changed from persecutor to apostle. Immediately, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes and he could see again. He got up and was baptized. Acts 9:18. What if the darkness you're experiencing isn't punishment, but preparation for your truest sight? Dr. Maya Langston, a neurologist and Christian contemplative from Oregon, teaches silence as a neural spiritual therapy. She says, when the brain enters stillness, it stops reacting and starts receiving. One of her patients, a burned-out CEO, learned to whisper the phrase, "Now it's my turn to see," every morning with both hands over his eyes. Within weeks, his anxiety dropped. He began dreaming again. His company pivoted and prospered through a strategy he claimed came in silence. In a remote monastery in the hills of Bulgaria, Brother Yuli, a former opera singer, took a vow of silence. For 10 years he spoke no words, but wrote prayers that read like downloads. One day, when asked how he survived the silence, he pointed to his eyes and then his heart. He later wrote, "When I stopped seeing the world, I started hearing God." That simple movement, placing hands over your eyes, is far more than meditative. It's prophetic positioning. Your hands become more than limbs. They become gates. They form a spiritual seal that closes out illusion and opens the sacred. When you shut your outer sight, you're not disconnecting from reality. You're connecting to the realest realm of all. Can you feel the shift even now? Can you sense the flicker of your soul's vision awakening? In biblical history, vision often began with blindness. Isaac, blind in his final years, blessed Jacob with words that altered generations. Elisha prayed that his servant's spiritual eyes would be opened, and suddenly the servant saw horses and chariots of fire surrounding them. 2 Kings 6:17. Could it be that your current blindness is not failure, but formation? Actress Viola Davis, in her memoir, writes, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. But what if you've never seen who you truly are, because your eyes have been occupied by everything you're not? What if your spirit has been waiting patiently for you to close your eyes so it can finally speak?" Joaquin, a blind 19-year-old from Bogota, began leading worship in total darkness. He told his pastor, "They think I can't see, but I see colors when I sing." He later described visions of gold waves and blue light while leading others in worship. He was blind, but not without vision. The world tells you to open your eyes and chase, but heaven calls you to cover your eyes and align. The gesture seems too gentle to matter, too quiet to carry weight, but that is its genius. Stillness offends the busy. Silence threatens the loud. But to the aligned, it activates the vault. Imagine the pearl oyster deep in the sea, hidden in total darkness, closed to the world. And yet, within that quiet shell, a treasure forms, not from performance, but from pressure and protection. That's what your inner sight is doing. It's forming the rare, the valuable, the timeless, under silence. God's vaults don't open with keys made of gold. They open through hearts made of surrender. You are not empty. You've just been visually overloaded by the illusions of this dimension. But the moment you cover your eyes and whisper, "Now it's your turn to see," something sacred begins. Don't delay. The vaults are open now. The gates will not stay wide forever. You've been entrusted with the posture of vision, not to admire it, but to enter. Prove that heaven did not misplace the key. This isn't yoga. It's not mysticism. This isn't about superstition or spiritual trends. This is divine architecture, the original blueprint of how heaven interacts with earth, being awakened inside you. And your obedience to this divine structure isn't a suggestion, it's a shield. In a world collapsing under fear, manipulation, and distortion, protection no longer comes from walls, alarms, or security systems. It comes from alignment, from covering, from the frequency you carry. Have you been protecting your soul with things that only guard the body? This simple act, placing both hands over your eyes, slowing your breath and whispering, "I am one with God," may look small, but in the unseen realm, it detonates light. It rewires your energetic field. It makes you invisible to enemy forces. It signals heaven that you've exited the matrix of fear and stepped into spiritual stealth. While the world yells, scrambles, and reacts, you are moving under divine radar, hidden, covered, untouchable. Can you imagine what your life would feel like if fear couldn't track you anymore? Scripture says, "You are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs of deliverance." Psalm 32:7. This isn't poetry, it's protocol. The act of stillness and alignment doesn't just protect your spirit, it confuses your enemies. It disarms the attack before it can form. You're no longer a predictable target, you're encoded. We live in a digital age, but our real battlefield is analog, the mind. Fatigue, overthinking, spiritual dullness, these are the bars of invisible prisons. And the enemy knows, if it can lock your thoughts, it never needs to touch your body. How many people do you know who walk free but live caged internally? Is that what's been happening to you without even noticing? In 2 Corinthians 10:4-5, Paul reminds us, "The weapons of our warfare are not carnal but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations." These strongholds aren't on hills, they're in minds. Imaginations corrupted by fear, assumptions locked in trauma, thoughts dressed as truth that were always lies. But now, you have a key. This ancient, once forbidden act doesn't just calm your thoughts, it frees your soul. The walls inside your head, built by trauma, lies, media noise, and distraction, are not permanent. They only feel immovable because you've tried to break them with earthly tools. But the power you now carry is not of this world. Will you finally dare to use it? In the book of Judges, Gideon was hiding in a winepress when God called him mighty warrior. He didn't feel powerful, he felt afraid. But God didn't need Gideon's confidence, he needed his obedience. And when Gideon followed divine strategy instead of logic, an army of 300 took down an empire. What if your battle plan looks like surrender because heaven's weapons don't match earth's? Tanya, a school counselor in Edinburgh, practiced this hands-over-eyes technique after years of panic attacks. At first, she felt nothing, just quiet discomfort. But after several days, something changed. The panic didn't disappear with a shout, it dissolved in stillness. She began counseling differently, from peace instead of pressure. One day a student said, "It feels like you can hear my soul." She smiled. That's because she had learned to listen to her own. Julius, a retired engineer in Kenya, used the same technique when grieving the loss of his wife. Instead of spiraling into despair, he would whisper, "I am one with God," in the dark of early morning. One day he said he heard, not audibly but internally, a simple phrase, "She is with me. Now build." He began mentoring young widowers in his village, turning loss into leadership. Pope Shenouda, the third of the Coptic Orthodox Church, once said, "Silence is the language of heaven. Everything else is a poor translation." That's why this simple trick is so powerful. It's fluent in heaven's dialect. You're not just quieting your thoughts. You're speaking a sacred language that only heaven fully comprehends. There's a reason this act has been hidden for centuries, because its power doesn't lie in the physical gesture, but in what it triggers. It is a jailbreak signal, a declaration of spiritual mutiny against every internal chain. When you block out the physical light and whisper the truth, you are launching a spiritual escape. You're refusing to live another day in a cell built from lies. Imagine the fox in the wild, navigating the night with stealth, undetected by predators. Its power isn't in aggression, but in strategy. That's you now. You've stopped announcing your every move. You've stopped broadcasting your vulnerability. You've become spiritually silent, but supernaturally loud. God has handed you this strategy not for display, but for deployment. Don't reduce this act to mindfulness or mental health. This is warfare at the frequency level. This is divine resistance against every thought that dares separate you from the truth of who you are in God. So shut out the world, cover your sight, whisper the eternal phrase, "I am one with God." That is not a coping mechanism. That is a command center activation, and heaven will not ignore it. You can almost feel it, can't you? The weight lifting, the pressure that once pressed against your chest beginning to dissolve. The fog, thick and blinding, now starts to clear. That's not imagination. That's revelation. Something ancient and true is coming back online inside of you. You were never meant to walk through life spiritually blindfolded. You were created to see with divine vision, to think with a renewed mind, to hear heaven without distortion. Hasn't your soul known this all along? This technique, the one you've been hesitant to try, the one that feels too simple to matter, is the doorway to freedom. But like all sacred things, it doesn't activate with performance. It responds to surrender, stillness, and consistency. What if the walls in your mind have been waiting not for a stronger push, but for a deeper silence? God is no longer withholding what was once sealed. He's not asking anymore. He's commanding. The same God who once told prophets to hide now tells you, use it. Use it now. The key has been placed in your hands like a holy weapon, and the instruction is clear. Not later, not eventually, but now. Why now? Because what's coming can't be navigated with logic. Strategy won't be enough. Education won't save you. The systems built by human hands will crumble like sandcastles in a storm. And can't you feel the wind already rising? When Noah began building the ark, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. People laughed. Systems were thriving. Logic said wait, but heaven said build. And when the rains came, it was too late to start. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. Hebrews 11:7. What if what you're building in silence now is your ark? And in this flood of chaos, only the spiritually attuned will remain standing. Only those who have built their bunker, not in stone but in spirit, will carry the strength to withstand the strike. This isn't poetry. This is prophecy. This technique isn't optional. It's not for spiritual elites or curious seekers. It's for the survivors, the remnant, the ones God is training underground for a war above ground. Viktor Frankl, neurologist, Holocaust survivor, and author of Man's Search for Meaning, once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. You may not be able to stop what's coming, but you can become unshakable in the midst of it. And that begins by going inward, not outward, into silence, into spirit, into strategy that doesn't come from man." Tanis, a 28-year-old freelance translator from Greece, was overwhelmed with fear after witnessing a violent protest in her neighborhood. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think. Her therapist gave her techniques. Her pastor gave her sermons. But it wasn't until she started covering her eyes, whispering, "I am one with God," each night before bed, that peace returned. 1 week later, in the same alley where she once trembled, she stopped a stranger from taking their own life, just by speaking truth without fear. Elias, a retired military strategist in Chile, had no faith background. But one day, while reading online, he stumbled across the idea of spiritual bunkers. He began practicing stillness with both hands over his eyes every morning at 5 a.m. What started as curiosity became transformation. He wrote in his journal, "I've fought many wars, but the one inside me was the deadliest. This was the first weapon that actually worked." In the book of Exodus, God instructed the Israelites to smear lamb's blood on their doorposts, not to symbolize faith, but to activate protection. There was a divine logic that transcended human understanding. That wasn't a symbolic act. It was a life or death protocol. What if this technique you're being shown is your modern-day seal of divine covering? You are no longer at the beginning. You're at the center of the storm. Systems are crumbling. Institutions are shaking. Prophets have gone quiet. But this message has reached you now for a reason. Not because you're more worthy, but because you're more ready. Do you feel the shift in your bones? That internal thrum that says, "This is the hour. This is the calling." Saint Teresa of Avila, mystic and reformer, once said, "It is love alone that gives worth to all things." But what if the most loving thing you can do for your future is obey this moment now, to treat stillness as sacred, to see obedience as warfare, to take seriously the command that wasn't given to the masses, but to the remnant? Imagine the sea turtle who lays her eggs in silence under the moon, trusting the tide, never returning to check. Her confidence is not in control, but in divine instinct. That's what you're being invited into. Not control, but calibrated confidence. The faith to move even when the sky is still clear. You have not stumbled upon this truth. Heaven has timed this message to reach your ears, your eyes, your spirit in this exact moment. Not one word is wasted. This is the command. Not to everyone, but to you. Obey it. Activate it. Live through it. This isn't metaphor. This isn't concept. This is strategy for survival. The bunker is real, and you will need it. You're not imagining it. The world is unraveling. Institutions once thought unbreakable. Governments, families, economies are collapsing in real time. But what you're seeing on the surface is just a symptom. Beneath the noise, an invisible war is shaking the very foundations of creation. And here's the truth. What you build your life on now, what you align with spiritually, will determine whether you remain standing or get swept away. Have you been building for peace or simply surviving chaos? This technique, this holy alignment, is not a motivational moment. It is your safe house, not a luxury, a necessity, a spiritual bunker that doesn't just protect, it prepares. It's where chosen ones are trained in silence, refined in stillness, and equipped without applause. God is not calling you to hide. He is calling you to fortify, to become immovable in a world that's emotionally collapsing. When David faced Goliath, he didn't run with armor or numbers. He came from the secret place, from years of quiet encounters with God in fields no one saw. The battlefield didn't make him ready, the bunker did. And with a sling and divine alignment, the loudest threat fell to the quietest warrior. As panic floods the world, you will operate in peace, in clarity, and in supernatural discernment. Why? Because while others built careers, you built inner sanctuary. While they clung to trends, you activated your frequency. While they chased platforms, you aligned with the highest source. Can you picture yourself hearing global chaos yet remaining unmoved? Can you imagine receiving crystal clear instruction in the middle of collapse? That isn't wishful thinking. That's spiritual fact for the ones who build in the quiet. In Psalm 91 verse 1, it is written, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." The secret place isn't mystical, it's internal. And that place is accessed with one small motion, hands over eyes, breath slowed, whispering from the depths, "I am one with God." This is not escapism, this is activation. A bunker is not isolation, it's insulation. You're not retreating from the world, you're stepping into your fullest weaponized state, not through fear, but through divine stillness. You don't stop the missiles, you don't silence the madness, but you block them from crossing into your atmosphere. Can you feel how sacred your spiritual perimeter really is? Therese, a 65-year-old retired teacher from Denmark, began using this method after watching her adult son spiral into addiction. Doctors couldn't reach him, therapists gave up. But Therese built a spiritual bunker in her living room. Daily silence, whispering truth, refusing fear. 3 months later, her son came home sober, shaking, saying, "I saw you in a dream. You were glowing." Leonardo da Vinci once said, "Silence is the ultimate resolution." That may sound artistic, but spiritually, it's warfare. Silence doesn't mean absence. It means frequency control. You become untouchable because your vibration shifts. The enemy doesn't find you because you're no longer broadcasting fear. The spiritual bunker is not a building, it's a state of being. It is who you become when your allegiance is no longer to the noise, but to the whisper. And the first stone is always laid the same way, hands over your eyes, all external light cut off, with one whisper, "I am one with God. Build now or fall later." Prophet Elijah didn't find God in the fire, the wind, or the earthquake. He found him in the gentle whisper, 1 Kings 19:12. That whisper still speaks today, but only to those who build in silence. Have you built your structure yet? Or are you still living in exposed vulnerability? Mateo, a drone engineer in Brazil, said he didn't believe in spiritual things until he had a panic attack that no science could resolve. One night, desperate, he practiced this trick a friend had forwarded him. Silence, eyes covered, whispering the phrase. Within days, his thoughts cleared. Within weeks, his entire life strategy shifted. He calls it the frequency that saved me. The missiles may fall, the madness may rise, but if you've been sealed in spirit, your atmosphere holds. Isaiah 43:2 says, "When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. The flames may surround you, but they will not enter you." Isn't that what your soul's been craving? Protection that doesn't isolate but elevates. Picture the great redwood tree, its roots stretching wide and deep. Fires rage through the forest, but the redwood remains, its bark resilient, its core moist, its essence untouchable. That's who you become when you bunker in alignment. Fire may touch your surroundings, but not your soul. This isn't symbolic. This isn't poetic metaphor. This is spiritual physics. Alignment with divine frequency shifts your aura. It changes your mental chemistry. It alters how you interpret threat and pressure. You're no longer walking through chaos. You're walking above it. Your posture changes, your presence expands, and even though the world shakes, you stay unshaken. That's the power of this divine technology. That's the force of obedience. That's the reality of the bunker, not built with bricks, but with truth. Your imagination is not some leftover tool from childhood. It is not weakness, nor is it wishful delusion. It is sacred technology embedded in you by the Creator. It is the divine theater where visions are conceived, where instructions are encoded, where the whisper of heaven becomes image and motion. Has the world trained you to dismiss it? Has fear made you believe your own thoughts can't be trusted? Imagination has been hijacked. Society wrapped it in fantasy and fear, but God always meant it as a spiritual projector, a sacred screen upon which divine strategy could be revealed. And when you close your eyes, cover them with your hands, and visualize union with God, you're not daydreaming. You are shifting dimensions. You're collapsing timelines. You're leaving fear frequency and entering God's code. This sacred practice isn't slow. It changes your frequency in seconds. Your heart rate slows. Your breath deepens. Your brain shifts from beta chaos to theta communion. Your spirit aligns with divine resonance. And then, clarity. Where there was anxiety, now stands authority. Where there was fragmentation, now flows alignment. What if the answer you've been begging for wasn't in your inbox, but already scripted within your imagination? In Romans 12:2, Paul writes, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." He didn't say transformed by effort, by grind, or even by emotion. He said mind, because the imagination is the engine room of faith. If the enemy can trap your imagination in fear, he never needs to touch your body. But if you reclaim it, your mind becomes a throne room. Don't let anyone mock this. This isn't woo-woo. This isn't escapism. This is spiritual science. Your thoughts are electric. Your imagination is magnetic. And this sacred technique, placing hands over eyes, whispering identity, visualizing union, links both to God's will. That's not philosophy. That's power. That's how you rewrite your atmosphere in one breath. Catherine, a visual artist in rural France, used to suffer from severe imposter syndrome. Her art sold well, but she felt fake. One night, she tried the technique her spiritual mentor described. Hands over eyes. 3 slow breaths, visualizing herself standing beside God. The next morning, she painted what she saw. That canvas now hangs in a cathedral in Lyon. She called it the Divine Mirror, because, she said for the first time, I believed what God saw in me. We are drowning in connection, but starving for meaning, digitally saturated, spiritually bankrupt. We scroll more than we seek. We post more than we pray, but heaven's signal can't be found on a screen. God is not waiting in trending topics. He is waiting in the silence between your breaths, in the sacred disconnect where noise is starved and spirit is fed. The prophet Habakkuk wrote, I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me. Habakkuk 2:1. He didn't say, listen to what God will say, but look to see, because vision precedes voice. Have you been trying to hear in noise what God is only willing to show in stillness? Elijah, a former marketing executive from Colombia, suffered from recurring panic attacks despite therapy, meditation, and medicine. His mother, a quiet intercessor, sent him one instruction: turn off everything. Cover your eyes. Whisper truth. He obeyed. On day 7, while in silence, he saw a blueprint, an exact map of a mentorship network for anxious young men. That network now spans 4 countries. The power grid of heaven does not run on likes, metrics, or signal bars. It runs on obedience, attention, alignment. Every time you cover your eyes and breathe with intention, you're unplugging from man's grid and reconnecting to divine voltage. Can you sense it even now? That buzzing under your skin? That is God's power reactivating your soul's signal. That's why the peace is instant. That's why the energy returns. It's not placebo, it's presence. You're not broken for needing silence. You're not unproductive for craving stillness. You're being recalibrated. You're being pulled into spiritual clarity at the speed of surrender. St. Gregory of Nyssa, a 4th century bishop and theologian, once wrote, "Concepts create idols. Only wonder understands anything." When you enter into divine imagination, you're stepping out of mental formulas and into wonder, into the holy realm where instruction is felt before it is spoken. Picture the monarch butterfly. Before it flies, it dies into a cocoon where its entire body liquefies. It doesn't fly because it tries harder. It flies because it was transformed in hidden stillness. Your imagination is that cocoon, not a trap, a chamber of becoming. Most people won't believe this. Many will scroll past. They will retreat to their feeds, to their fatigue, to the illusion of safety through distraction. But not you. You're still here. You didn't swipe away. You didn't dismiss this. Why? Because your spirit already knows. You are part of the 1%, the remnant, the sensitive, the obedient, the ones heaven can trust with activation. You're not just visualizing, you are architecting. You're not escaping reality, you're editing it at the frequency of God. So now, close your eyes, place your hands gently, breathe, whisper, "I am one with God." And in that moment, heaven downloads what the world could never offer in 1,000 notifications. The divine is waiting. Disconnect now, before the signal dies completely. You were not sent here to blend into the background noise of a crumbling world. You weren't born to adapt to chaos, but to rise through it, silently, strategically, supernaturally. While others panic loudly, while systems collapse noisily, you are called to break through in stillness. That's the mark of the chosen, not reaction, but revelation. The blueprint has never been public. It's always been hidden, protected, not by accident, but by divine strategy. And now, for the first time in generations, it's being revealed, not to the masses, but to the remnant. The sensitive, the attuned, the ones whose hunger for truth is so loud, it echoes in the spirit realm. Do you feel it? That ache, that stirring, that's not discomfort. That's divine instruction. This technique, hands over eyes, whispering truth, is not just a self-help habit. It's your unlock code, your summons, your assignment. The 1% don't wait for confirmation. They act on revelation. And if you've been shown the way, there's only one thing left to do: walk it. Use the technique. Open the channel. Don't just study the blueprint, become it. There's a reason Jesus disappeared into the wilderness for 40 days before his public ministry. A reason Moses ascended the mountain for 40 nights while others waited in fear. A reason Elijah fled to the cave before he heard the whisper. Every true transformation begins with disappearance. Power is not handed out in the spotlight. It's downloaded in obscurity. This isn't rejection. This is refinement. God hides what he's about to reveal. God silences what he's about to amplify. You're not being overlooked. You're being fortified. Let the world chase influence. Let them drown in applause. But you chase intimacy. You seek the source. St. Anthony the Great, the father of Christian monasticism, retreated into the Egyptian desert not to escape, but to engage in a higher warfare. He said, "He who sits in solitude and is quiet has escaped from 3 wars: hearing, speaking, seeing." In stillness he found dominion. Could it be that your silence is the very thing that makes you dangerous to darkness? This technique is your doorway into that sacred chamber of clarity, the place where blueprints are written, where destiny is not taught, but transferred. Do not fear this silence. Embrace it. It is the forge of your future. Nico, a systems engineer from Estonia, began practicing this spiritual method each morning at dawn. He covered his eyes, stilled his breath, whispered, "I am one with God." After weeks of silence, he began waking with specific instructions, names, locations, even phrases. One of those names led him to a woman who was on the verge of ending her life. She later said, "You spoke what I'd only told God." Lucia, a dance instructor in São Paulo, would always choreograph in chaos. Noise, movement, pressure. But one day, overwhelmed by burnout, she covered her eyes and sat in stillness. What followed was a vision, movements she'd never conceived. She says she didn't create that routine, she received it. That routine would go viral and land her on an international stage. But the real performance happened in the stillness. And you've felt the tremors lately. You've dreamed of storms. You've noticed the shift. You can feel the final strikes approaching, not as theories, but as pulses in your bones. This isn't anxiety, it's discernment. And in this moment, one command remains. Break the seal of fear, the barrier of logic, the wall of limitation that's kept you stuck in an earthly frequency. Break it. And how? With this sacred act, with the hammer of stillness. When you cover your eyes and declare, "I am one with God," you're not making a statement. You're initiating a spiritual jailbreak. Once the seal breaks, revelation flows. Not the kind found in books or podcasts, but revelation that lives beyond time, beyond dimension. That's not fantasy. That's spiritual intelligence, the kind you'll need to survive the collapse that's already begun. In 2 Kings 6:17, Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." And suddenly his servant saw the hills filled with horses and chariots of fire. They were always there. He just didn't have the sight for it. Could that be what's waiting for you now? Billions will try to survive through strength, but the chosen survive through sight. Not earthly vision, but divine clarity. You must see differently to live differently. Imagine the owl, gliding silently through the night, eyes adapted to darkness, hearing what no other creature can. It doesn't fight. It flies with precision, guided by vision, not panic. That is who you become when you choose this path. So now, hands over eyes, whisper it with your soul. I am one with God. Break the seal, change the lens, enter the vision. Before the storm blinds the rest, you are not helpless, you are not weak, you are chosen, and your clarity is your shield. Your voice was never created to echo fear. It wasn't formed to imitate culture or blend into background noise. It was designed to pierce realms, to carry sound waves that shatter deception, and to awaken souls with the frequency of heaven. So, why have you been whispering when the fire inside you is meant to roar? In a world intoxicated by volume, God is raising a remnant whose voices won't be measured in decibels or followers, but in weight. Not the kind of weight that crushes, but the kind that breaks yokes. These voices don't come from platforms, they come from silence. Have you ever wondered why you felt silenced or misunderstood? Perhaps your voice wasn't meant for echo chambers. It was designed to speak directly into the spirit realm. Isaiah 54 declares, "The sovereign Lord has given me a well-instructed tongue, to know the word that sustains the weary. He wakens me morning by morning, wakens my ear to listen like one being instructed." This kind of voice isn't trained in seminars, it's refined in solitude. Are you allowing God to wake your inner ear, or are you still rehearsing someone else's message? Most people speak from the mind, facts, intellect, quick conclusions. Others speak from emotion, impulse, trauma, noise, but the chosen ones speak from the spirit. That voice doesn't flatter, it doesn't perform, it transforms. That voice doesn't just inform, it ignites. When aligned, it disrupts systems and dismantles principalities. Could your silence have been less about rejection and more about preparation? Before you speak, you must align, not just your thoughts, but your entire frequency. The forbidden trick, hands over eyes, stillness, whispered surrender, is not just about calming your mind. It's about tuning your instrument. Because in silence, God calibrates your tone, your truth, and your timing. He won't send your voice into battle until it's weaponized with clarity. This isn't about public speaking, it's about divine speaking. When you speak from true alignment, one sentence, just one, can carry the weight of prophecy. It slices through demonic interference like a sword. It revives what looked dead. It doesn't echo, it establishes. Elizabeth, a former broadcast journalist in Sydney, walked away from her career after a divine dream. In it, she was holding a microphone made of fire. She began practicing stillness daily with the hands over eyes technique. Weeks later, her voice, once shaky, carried an authority she never trained for. She now counsels abuse survivors, and they call her the one who speaks, and the walls fall down. Saint Macrina the Younger, a 4th century Christian philosopher, was said to speak so gently that it felt like prayer, but her words altered entire theological conversations in her time. She once said, "Silence is the beginning of wisdom, but speech, when anointed, becomes the breath of God." Are you still speaking to be heard by people, or are you preparing to be released by heaven? Speak less to the crowd, speak more to God, because when the time comes, you won't be echoing opinion. You'll be releasing fire. You weren't made to mimic culture. You were formed to disrupt it. But divine disruption begins in quiet realignment. Obedience is not about rule following. It's about resonance. It's energetic. It's vibrational. It's choosing to say yes even when your logic screams no. Every obedient act sends out a signal, like a beacon saying to heaven, "I'm ready now." And heaven doesn't move on desperation. Heaven moves on readiness. Jonas, a truck driver from Memphis, used to feel invisible. He heard God speak in silence, but never dared to share it. One day, while pulled over in a storm, he felt led to place his hands over his eyes and whisper, "I'm ready." That week, his words rescued a suicidal co-worker and began a prayer chain that's now spread to 6 states. His voice didn't get louder, it got sharper. Have you been crying, "Where is God? Why is nothing shifting?" Could it be that heaven is not delayed, but paused, waiting on your alignment? Not out of punishment, but out of protocol. Heaven cannot violate its own order. Are you ready to move from wondering to releasing? In John 11, Jesus stood outside Lazarus's tomb and shouted only 3 words, "Lazarus, come out." That one sentence revived a man who'd been dead 4 days. Because when words are spoken from divine alignment, they don't echo, they resurrect. The world doesn't need more commentary. It doesn't need louder voices. It needs anointed ones who've been refined in silence and released in precision. Imagine the archer's arrow, drawn back, still, focused, until the moment of release when it cuts through chaos. That's your voice. You are not a megaphone. You are a missile of meaning. Picture the snow leopard, silent, poised, nearly invisible in the mountain terrain. It doesn't roar to dominate. It moves in mastery, striking with clarity, not chaos. That's how the chosen move. That's how the remnant speaks. Heaven is listening for your signal. Don't rehearse the world's script any longer. Activate the voice God buried in you. Don't wait for applause. Don't wait for consensus. Just align and release. So cover your eyes, sink into stillness, whisper with your spirit, "I am one with God." Let heaven tune your voice, and when the silence ends, speak and let fire flow. The technique you've been shown, that gentle act of stillness, of covering your eyes and whispering truth, is not a suggestion. It's your next step, your obedience test. It may seem small, But in the spirit realm, it's the act that shatters delay. When you move, gates burst open. Heaven is not holding back. It's waiting for you to say yes, and not with words, but with action. If you've been feeling stuck, dry, disconnected, it's not because God has abandoned you. It's because your next level doesn't fit within your old patterns. New revelation demands new posture. You can't pour divine rain into a cup that's still flipped upside down. Have you been asking for clarity while clinging to outdated alignment? God isn't waiting for your perfection. He's waiting for your participation. Your yes begins not in performance, but in stillness. Eyes closed, hands over face, breath slowed, whispering from the core, I align, I surrender, I trust. Stop waiting on God like he's a late train. Heaven is fully loaded with your clarity, your strength, your next assignment. But heaven's movement is voice activated, and the voice it's waiting for is yours. In Deuteronomy 30:14, it is written, "The word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so you may obey it." This isn't about distant blessings. It's about immediate activation. Obedience is the ignition. Revelation is the reward. When you move, the impossible becomes inevitable. So why delay? Too many have been taught to fear their emotions, to suppress grief, to silence anxiety. But what if your emotions weren't problems to solve, but messages to interpret? Could it be that your anxiety isn't a weakness, but a code from your spirit trying to alert you to a misalignment? Could your grief be more than dysfunction? What if it's an invitation into deeper healing? Feelings aren't flaws, they're flags, markers. God didn't accidentally wire your soul with emotion. He encoded it with sensitivity so that your body would alert your spirit when something sacred is about to emerge. Are you listening or just numbing? Aria, a theatre director from Belgium, was taught her sadness made her unstable. But in her darkest week, she began practicing the stillness technique. One night, as she whispered, "I align," her tears poured. But the sadness turned into a melody. She wrote a stage play in 3 nights based on her pain, and it sold out within days. She said, "I didn't escape my grief, I translated it." God often speaks through feelings we're taught to ignore. In 1 Samuel 1, Hannah's anguish was so intense the priest mistook it for drunkenness, but her pain birthed a prophet. In bitterness of soul, Hannah wept much and prayed to the Lord. 1 Samuel 1:10. Have you been mistaking your emotional intensity for instability when it may be your gateway to intercession? Xavier, a high school science teacher in Maine, suffered panic attacks every Sunday night. Nothing helped. But one afternoon, desperate and shaking, he tried placing both hands over his face and whispering, "I trust." The next week, the panic didn't return. Instead, he walked into school and felt something shift. He began teaching with empathy. His students began opening up. That wasn't therapy. That was spiritual recalibration. God is not afraid of your emotions. He created them, and he moves through them, but he also transforms them. When emotions are experienced in his presence, they shift from burdens to blueprints, from weight to weaponry. Anger becomes passion, sadness becomes sacred sensitivity, fear becomes fire. Why have we feared what God designed? Why do we run from what was built to guide us? The trick is not to feel less, but to feel in alignment. Cover your eyes, go still, let the sadness rise, let the frustration speak. Not so you drown in it, but so you can finally translate it. Imagine the storm cloud, heavy, dense, ominous, but it does not stay, it breaks, and when it does, rain nourishes the soil. That's your sadness, that's your anger. Temporary weather with the power to birth renewal if you'll let it move through you in the right atmosphere. The silence of this technique is not a pause, it's a portal, a sacred waiting room where your soul, body, and spirit reconnect. Most try to numb the pain. But you sit in it, you listen, and because of that, healing flows where logic never could reach. Saint Ignatius of Loyola once taught that emotion, when discerned through prayer, becomes the raw material of divine conversation. He said, "God deals directly with the soul when it is open. Have you been open or just operating?" This divine stillness is not a delay, it's a download. It's where heaven rewrites your reactions and re-anchors your responses. It doesn't just help you cope, it calls you into clarity. So now, hands over eyes. Breathe. Let your emotions rise, not to break you, but to build you. Whisper with your whole being, "I align, I surrender, I trust." And in that space, watch fear become insight. Watch tears become oil. Watch your soul finally speak its native language, truth. Because when your emotions are healed and aligned, they don't destroy you, they empower you. The world speaks of the future like it's a far-off horizon, something to chase, something delayed, something always one step ahead. But the truth? The future is not ahead of you, it's already inside you. The strategy, the solutions, the systems that will reshape culture, they were encoded into your soul before you were born. You are not waiting on time. Time is waiting on your alignment. The divine doesn't download in chaos. It doesn't activate through hustle. The future that God placed in you, those blueprints, those inventions, that prophetic insight, it awakens in stillness, in sacred silence, in proximity to presence. Are you chasing what should be emerging from within? Could the breakthrough you're seeking already be buried under distraction? This technique, the simple, sacred act of covering your eyes, whispering identity, isn't just for spiritual protection. It's for revelation. It's the ignition switch for heaven's data. God isn't only trying to shield you, He's trying to launch you. But He cannot upload strategy to a spirit crowded with noise. That's why you're being pulled away. Not out of rejection, but for recalibration. In Exodus 24, God called Moses up the mountain, not to escape the people, but to receive the blueprint for an entire civilization. Moses entered the cloud as he went up on the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Exodus 24:18. Have you mistaken your mountain for isolation when it's actually initiation? God has blueprints with your name on them, but He won't send them through chaos. He sends them through silence. You don't need more opinions. You need inner Wi-Fi, signal strength from the secret place. And once you're tapped in, what floods your spirit will shock your intellect. Future technologies, prophetic innovations, solutions for problems not yet named. That's why the enemy doesn't fear your work ethic. He fears your alignment. Amara, a former software developer in Nairobi, felt pushed out of her company during a restructuring. Devastated, she isolated for weeks, but every morning she practiced the sacred posture, hands over eyes, deep stillness, whispering, "I align." Within 3 weeks, she dreamed an entire app, an AI-powered trauma assistant now being beta tested by refugee camps. The silence, she said, was the seedbed for the solution. The ones who change the world don't start by doing more. They start by becoming more. This isn't just survival. This is supernatural innovation. You're not just escaping the fire. You're learning to carry it. You are heaven's technology wrapped in skin. You are the blueprint someone else is praying for. You are not the echo. You're the original sound. Have you been waiting for someone to release you? What if heaven already did? And you're just one act of stillness away from launching. Why does it feel like no one sees you? Why are doors closing? Why does this season feel like silence instead of favor? Because separation precedes elevation. Every major move of God begins in obscurity. God hides what's holy. He isolates the chosen not to punish, but to prepare. In Luke 4, before Jesus ever stepped into public power, he was led into the wilderness by the Spirit, not by accident, not by Satan, but by divine assignment. The isolation was the incubator. The wilderness was the weapon. Could your loneliness be sacred ground? Isaac, a 21-year-old mechanical student in Bolivia, struggled with intense loneliness after transferring universities. He thought he had lost everything, but during one quiet morning of whispered surrender, he saw himself in a dream designing energy-efficient water systems. That dream turned into a thesis, which turned into a prototype, which is now being implemented in drought-prone villages. He said, "I thought I was forgotten. Turns out I was being focused." Mother Teresa, known for her radical compassion, also endured decades of spiritual silence. She once wrote, "God is the friend of silence. See how nature, trees, flowers, grass grow in silence. Could your spiritual drought be the soil where your assignment is maturing? You've been hidden for a reason. The crowd would dilute your power. The spotlight would distract your focus. The applause would mislabel your voice. So God withdrew you, not out of neglect, but out of mercy. He needed to anchor you before the platform. He needed to strip off what can't go with you. Before elevation comes excavation. The excavation hurts, but it's holy. God doesn't remove what's good. He removes what's insufficient for the next. Are you still grieving doors that were meant to close? Imagine the geode, dull, grey, unremarkable on the outside, but crack it open and it reveals radiant crystals formed in pressure and silence. No one praised its process, but when the time came, its brilliance couldn't be hidden. So stop calling this season a delay. It's a divine filter. Stop resenting the silence. It's a signal. Go within. Whisper the phrase, "I align, I surrender, I trust and watch." Watch as heaven responds. Watch as blueprints download. Watch as the future awakens, not ahead of you, but from within you. Because you are not behind, you are not overlooked, you are in position, and the world needs what's inside of you. This sacred technique isn't just for the confident, the celebrated, the visible. It's for the hidden ones, the misfits, the wilderness dwellers, the ones who feel like exiles in a world that rewards loudness and punishes depth. When no one else gets your silence, your struggle, your strange hunger for more, God does. He meets you not in the applause, but in the absence, not in the noise, but in the narrow place. And there, in that silence he orchestrated, in that ache of divine loneliness, he begins to whisper what the world could never give you. Identity, strategy, power. Could it be that what feels like rejection is really refinement? Could your isolation be the room where your mantle is being tailored? This trick, the practice of stillness, of surrender, of sacred darkness, is what turns the separation into something holy. It takes what could feel like exile and makes it launch mode. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. So, don't rush back into the crowd. Don't cling to the noise that once distracted you. Stay in the silence. Let God finish the firework in your bones before the stage ever sees the light. In 1 Kings 19, after Elijah's showdown with the prophets of Baal, he fled into the wilderness, discouraged, burnt out, ready to die. But it was there, in the stillness of a cave, that God met him, not in the fire, the earthquake, or the wind, but in a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. Have you been expecting God to speak in fireworks while he's been waiting for you in a whisper? Place your hands over your eyes and remind yourself, you are not forsaken, you are being formed. And soon, when the process is complete, you will not emerge fragile, you'll emerge unbreakable. You've been taught to treat the spiritual as one realm and the physical as another, to separate what happens in the soul from what manifests in the body. But the truth is, you were never meant to be divided. Your body is not just a container, it is a temple, a living portal. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you? 1 Corinthians 6:19. What if your very cells are singing with divine memory? Your fatigue, your restlessness, your gut-level resistance to certain people or places, these are not random. They are not flaws. They are spiritual signals wrapped in biology. Could that ache in your chest be the weight of an unspoken calling? Could that exhaustion be the residue of spiritual overload your body was never meant to carry alone? God never intended your spirit to function independently from your body. He chose your body as His dwelling place, which means your nervous system, your breath, your blood flow, all carry sacred intelligence. That's why this trick, the sacred silence, the hands over eyes, the breath slowed, is not just spiritual alignment, it's physiological recalibration. Lucia, a yoga instructor from Argentina who had lost her sense of purpose after leaving a spiritual cult, began practicing the whisper daily. She said the first few times she placed her hands over her face, she wept uncontrollably. I thought I was just breathing, she said, but it felt like something in my cells was releasing grief I didn't even know I had. A month later, she launched a trauma-informed movement therapy program for survivors. My body knew before my brain did, she said. The trick unblocked it. Your body has been carrying things your spirit was never meant to absorb: trauma, lies, curses, projections. Every time you cover your physical sight, you invite your body to release the energetic residue of warfare. The breath deepens. The heart slows. The trauma lifts. Could it be that what you thought was anxiety was actually divine detox? Desmond Tutu, the late South African archbishop and human rights leader, once said, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." But what if the light begins not externally, but within your own flesh, once realigned with its creator? Let's not forget the woman with the issue of blood in Mark 5. For 12 years she suffered physically, but it was her faith expressed through physical movement that released the miracle. If I can just touch his garment, she thought. And when she did, Jesus said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." She didn't wait for a church service. She let her body respond to belief. Could your healing come not just from praying harder, but from trusting the signals in your skin? Tyler, a fictional marine biologist from Nova Scotia, struggled with chronic shoulder pain for years. After months of testing and failed diagnoses, he began daily sessions of breath-based stillness, covering his eyes, aligning in silence. He reported visions, emotional breakthroughs, and full mobility within weeks. What medicine couldn't release, presence did. He began teaching wounded veterans how to reclaim their inner alignment, and their healing followed. Imagine a tuning fork struck in a forest, its sound waves invisible but undeniably real. That's your nervous system when you align with God's frequency. The resonance shifts, the vibration elevates. You begin to heal, not by effort, but by frequency. So what if your body wasn't your burden, but your instrument? What if stillness is the calibration key to unlock what pills and plans could never touch? What if your discomfort isn't dysfunction, but divine direction? What if God is using your very biology to broadcast His whispers? This sacred practice isn't mystical nonsense. It's divine architecture activating. You were never meant to live detached from your physical temple. God wants to move through your emotions, your cells, your breath. Every part of you was created to commune with Him. So sit in the silence. Place your hands over your eyes. Let your body, your breath, your being return to source. Whisper it. I align. I surrender. I trust, because the healing you crave might not come from outside. It might already be living in your skin, waiting for your silence to set it free. When you sit in divine silence, everything recalibrates, not just your soul, but your entire system. Hormones begin to shift. The nervous system slows. Trauma loosens its grip. Your mind, once trapped in outdated programs, and inherited fear begins to shed layers. This isn't just spiritual therapy. This is divine neuroscience. God doesn't only speak to your soul, He speaks through your skin, through your breath, through your stillness. What if the headache isn't random? What if the tension in your chest isn't weakness, but divine static? God trying to get your attention through the body you've tried to ignore. Your body was never a barrier. It was always the bridge. This vessel, flawed, fragile, yes, but fearfully and wonderfully made, isn't just something you live in. It's a living antenna. It receives, it processes, it translates heaven into earth. You formed my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Psalm 139, verse 13. Could you be misreading your fatigue as failure when it's really the frequency misalignment of a sacred design? When your body aligns with your spirit, you don't just feel peace, you become a portal, a walking collision point between heaven and earth. You don't carry the presence, you become it. This is why stillness matters. This is why your obedience to the sacred act, hands over eyes, whispering identity, isn't mystical. It's mechanical. It's divine coding running through human circuitry. You've carried that strange ache for as long as you can remember. That feeling of not fitting, of being too intense, too deep, too awake. What if that wasn't a problem to solve, but a signal to honor? What if that discomfort was proof of your assignment? Malik, a fictional architect in Morocco, always sensed he was too much for corporate spaces, too spiritually aware, too emotionally tuned. But in solitude, practicing stillness, he began receiving dream downloads. Visions of buildings designed with sacred geometry and energy flow. Today, he's known across the region for designing trauma-informed schools that align with sunrise patterns and nervous system balance. His weirdness became his world-changing gift. What if your difference is not a disruption to suppress, but a divine clue to amplify? The chosen ones don't walk through open doors, they create new ones. That kind of assignment requires solitude, misunderstanding, fire. From childhood you felt it, the pull to ask deeper questions, to challenge what others accepted blindly. It wasn't rebellion, it was recognition. Jesus questioned the temple leaders at age 12. Was that disrespect, or was it early divine awareness? You weren't made to blend into broken systems. You were designed to fracture them, not with noise but with clarity, not with protest signs, but with inner alignment. You are a divine recalibration point. Your very presence begins to destabilize dysfunction and call it to truth. Lady Gaga, globally known for her avant-garde artistry and advocacy, once said, "You define beauty yourself. Society doesn't define your beauty." But long before she found fame, she was ridiculed for being too much, too strange. She channeled it. She aligned it. She built a movement from her difference. Could you be on the brink of the same transformation? But alignment is not about applause. It's about assignment. And assignments often start in the fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't conform to the king's system. They stood alone, and God showed up in the fire. Daniel 3:25. What if your fire is not a sign you've done something wrong, but confirmation you're doing something right? Evelyn, a quiet nurse in rural Canada, began practicing the sacred silence during night shifts. Everyone called her odd. She never joined gossip, always walked off to pray. But one night, during a massive power outage, her hospital wing remained fully peaceful. She later said she felt angels standing at every door. "The trick isn't just protection," she whispered, "it's atmosphere control." Could it be that your stillness is stabilizing more than just you? Nature doesn't ask permission to be different. The eagle soars while others flap. The volcano stays silent for decades before erupting with unstoppable force. The pearl is formed only in irritation and friction. Could your divine brilliance be forming inside your agitation? This technique, it's not a soft practice. It's a sacred ignition. It fuels your difference. It honors your intensity. It sharpens your discernment. And in a world that rewards mimicry, heaven rewards obedience. Even when obedience looks like standing alone, walking misunderstood, burning quietly. The spiritual strike isn't about hiding in fear. It's about confronting the storm from the inside out, with breath, with frequency, with fire. You are not escaping the world. You are reformatting it with your existence. So when you feel the weight of being too much, when your voice shakes and your hands tremble, when no one claps and no one understands, remember, God didn't make you to fit. He made you to free. Whisper it again. I align. I surrender. I trust, because the world is loud. But you were designed to shift it in silence. You weren't made for the system. You were made to rewrite it. So here you are, standing in the silence between what was and what must now become. You've remembered what the world tried to make you forget. You were never meant to mimic. You were designed to disrupt. This trick, the sacred alignment, the whisper in the dark, the stillness that unlocks the code, it is no longer optional. It's the map, the method, the mantle. You've seen the signs. You've felt the shaking. The world is spiraling louder, faster, but you've been called to rise quieter, stronger, clearer. God didn't reveal this to you so you could admire it. He revealed it because you are now required to carry it. So don't delay. Let this be your activation moment. If this message vibrated within you like a bell that's always been waiting to be struck, like this video as a confirmation, not for me, but as a declaration, I receive the call. Comment 777 below to mark the covenant. That number isn't decoration, it's alignment, completion, assignment accepted. And if you know someone else carrying silent fire, share this with them. The strike is coming, but so is the remnant. Chosen ones must find each other, and if you're new here, subscribe, not because of algorithms, but because this is more than content. This is consecration. What's coming next will not only teach you, it will initiate you. To every one of you who has ever supported this message, whether through super thanks, a comment, a share, or just by showing up in sacred silence, thank you. You're not just consuming this message, you're helping carry it. You're part of the quiet revolution, the invisible army, the frequency family. And now, as you step back into your world, may every false weight fall from your shoulders. May every lie lose its grip. May your inner world become the strongest place you know. May clarity flow like oil. May strategy rise like light. And may peace go ahead of you like a shield. The strike will come. The shaking will increase. But so will the ones who are aligned. So will the ones who have activated what was once forbidden. You are not too late. You are not too much. You are not alone. You are the blueprint. You are the portal. You are God's chosen one. And now, walk in it. Before the strike happens, use it. Because now, it's allowed.